Good morning, and welcome to this online worship service, a time set aside each week to think about what really matters in our lives and in the life of the world around us. Our mission here at Sunnyhill is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. If you're a newcomer or visitor to our congregation, please visit our website, sunnyhill.org, and click on the button that says New to Sunnyhill. We would love to let you know how you can connect with the congregation even during this time when our building is closed. Today, as we listen to our opening music, we encourage everyone who is watching or listening, not just newcomers, but everyone, to let us know you're here by saying good morning or hello in the comment thread on Facebook or YouTube. We'd love to hear from all of you and have a chance to say good morning to everyone who is with us today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for saying hello. Our opening words were written by Tanya Marquez. It is now that we are called as witnesses of the world, to mend it, to change its course, to restore it. It is now that we are called to act on our values, not to hide, not to fear, but to be bold and loud. It is now that we are called to continue our fight for justice, to organize, to speak up. It is now. Let us gather. Let us give each other courage. Let us begin the work of now.
Please join us in saying the words for lighting our chalice.
We light this chalice in memory of those who came before us, who were willing to challenge the status quo, even at great personal risk, giving us a legacy of freedom and a love of truth, a legacy that warms our hearts and lights our paths.
I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul.
I'm going to share a story about a brave young girl named Joanne. Young Joanne did not know what her grandmother and the other adults in Selma, Alabama were so upset about. Joanne had already learned about freedom in school. She knew that in 1863, 102 years ago, Abraham Lincoln had freed all the slaves. So why was her grandmother going over to Brown Chapel day after day for meetings about a fight for freedom? At the Methodist chapel, songs were sung and plans were made. There was even a training, as if for a war. People were pushed and insulted on purpose so they could practice not pushing or talking back. This puzzled Joanne too. It seemed strange that her grandmother's freedom fight involved keeping calm, acting peaceful, and not fighting back. One day, Grandma took Joanne to Selma's downtown to get a new pair of shoes. Joanne saw a pair she liked and tried them on. They were a little bit too big, so her grandmother asked for a smaller size, but the store clerk said no. The clerk demanded that Grandma buy the pair that didn't fit. They had to, she said, because no white person would ever buy them now that Joanne's feet had been in them. They walked by Carter's drugstore. Through the window, Joanne could see the clean, shiny lunch counter, where children her age were being treated to ice cream served by a waitress. She desperately wanted to sit there too. "When we get our freedom," her grandmother said. That's when Joanne understood. The adults were fighting for freedom to sit at that counter, to enjoy a nice ice cream on a hot day, to try on shoes without being embarrassed. Soon, Joanne became a freedom fighter too, marching for black voting rights. In February 1965, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came to Selma to lead the demonstrators in a peaceful march. When the police began to hit and arrest people, Joanne was one of the children taken to jail for several days. Surrounding Joanne in jail were familiar people, young and old, many from the George Washington Carver housing project where she lived. She had known they could be arrested. What might come next? Another step toward freedom. Joanne marched again on March 7th, with several hundred people planning to walk more than 50 miles to Alabama's capital city, Montgomery. But police would not let the marchers over the bridge out of Selma. Attacked by police with weapons, some riding on horses, the marchers scattered. Joanne heard screaming all around her. The next thing she knew, she awoke in a car with her head on her sister's lap. She felt tears drip onto her. She realized it was not tears, but blood from a wound on her sister's head. History remembers that march as Bloody Sunday. The next march to Montgomery, 2 weeks later, ended with a rousing speech by Dr. King at the state capitol. Joanne was part of that march, too. Joanne Bland still lives in Selma today. As times have changed, she has always found new ways to be a freedom fighter. In 1993, she co-founded the National Voting Rights Museum, where anyone could come learn about the events that happened in Selma, why the march happened, what it accomplished, and what remains to be done. Now retired from the museum, she guides educational tours along the very streets where she lived the fight for freedom in 1965.
The song we are about to hear, One Voice, which was originally recorded for a service last summer, was written by Ruth Moody, who recently said this about the song. Not only is there a lot of division and unrest in the world right now, but because of COVID, people can't actually physically be together. So I think the message of One Voice is doubly important because it's about coming together and joining together, and it's about peace. Moody continues, music connects people to their feelings, their memory, their subconscious. It connects people to each other. It opens portals in the mind and heart that nothing else can. And I think on so many levels, One Voice is speaking to people, and it's a really good feeling to know it's helping people and that it is providing hope.
This is the sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice, the sound of one who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of voices too. The sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of all of us, singing with love and the will to trust. Leave the rest behind, it will turn to dust. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all of us.
This is the sound of one voice. One people, one voice. A song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. Each week at this time in the service, we share joys and sorrows submitted by members of the congregation. We share the things that we are celebrating, as well as the things that we are mourning, so that they do not need to be held alone. Joys and sorrows may be submitted online from our website, or you can contact me or a member of our staff or pastoral care team by email or phone. After each joy or sorrow that I read, please respond by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." A sorrow from Anne McGrain. Anne says, "My mother, Karen McGrain, died on Tuesday, February 9th of vascular dementia. Please keep my father, David, in your thoughts." To Anne, her father David, and their family, we hold you in our hearts. A sorrow from Elizabeth Scanlon. Elizabeth says, "Megan Diaz, our daughter, has tested positive for COVID and is ill at home. My granddaughters are with her and we cannot go there until she has recovered and they complete a quarantine. Please send healing thoughts. We are desperately worried about the twins getting sick since they cannot leave." To the Scanlons, their daughter and granddaughters, we hold you in our hearts. A joy submitted on behalf of Nancy Bellamy. Nancy was scheduled to come home this weekend after lengthy stays in the hospital and a rehab facility. She is grateful to be able to return home and grateful for the many expressions of support from the Sunnyhill community. To Nancy, Randy, and family, we hold you in our hearts. Let us keep in mind these joys and sorrows, as well as those held too closely to be shared at this time. Please join me in the spirit of meditation or prayer. Let us pause for a moment to listen, to hear with the ears of our ears open, that we might know what sings in our hearts. It might be a somber song of lament, a song that touches those deep, aching places where loss has left emptiness and crimson scars. It might be a song of pure joy, a song that flutters and soars in wild arcs, taking us to awe-filled heights of absolute wonder. It might be a song unfinished, a song that has paused and left us wondering what might be next in our journey. Let us take a moment of silence to listen to what sings in our hearts. In all the songs of our hearts, we detect stirrings of something more, stirrings that lead to something unknown, may we remember to listen to these songs, and may we find in them solace and courage, beauty and wonder to face whatever is ahead. Amen.
Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do?
Today is the 56th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, which took place on March 7th of 1965, when some 600 peaceful civil rights marchers in Selma, Alabama, led by John Lewis, among others, were attacked by state troopers and a posse of white men. Local Sheriff Jim Clark had issued an order for all white men in the county over the age of 21 to report to the courthouse that morning to be deputized. The purpose of the newly deputized mob and the state troopers was clear. They were gathered to use physical force and state-sanctioned violence to send a message to the protesters. Trapped on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the marchers were brutalized, beaten with batons and nightsticks, charged upon by men on horseback, tear-gassed, trampled, and terrorized. John Lewis suffered a skull fracture and bore scars on his head from the incident for the rest of his life. In all, 17 marchers were hospitalized and 50 treated for lesser injuries. The day soon became known as Bloody Sunday within the Black community. Events in Alabama in 1965 and Dr. King's call for clergy and other citizens drew thousands of people to Selma in the days surrounding these events. These days, we sometimes talk about what it means to de-center whiteness. Part of what it means is to be willing to interrupt the normal flow of our lives in order to bear witness to the oppression and marginalization of others, and to stand, walk, march, shake, rattle, and roll in solidarity with those others. Several hundred Unitarian Universalists were among the people who answered this call in 1965 and flocked to Selma. 2 UUs died in Selma. One of them, the Reverend James Reeb, is mentioned fairly often in discussions about this era. Reeb was eulogized by Martin Luther King and became known as one of the martyrs of the movement. Less well known was Viola Liuzzo, a Unitarian Universalist layperson whose work and whose life I would like us to remember today. To that end, I have asked Sunnyhill member Heidi Miller-Smith to help me by reading the part of Viola Liuzzo. While Liuzzo's story does center on one white woman's experiences, it's also a story about stepping out, way out of one's comfort zone and making use of one's privilege in order to bear witness and aid to a larger movement. I am indebted to several sources of information included in today's presentation, including Mark Morrison Reed's book, The Selma Awakening, and Mary Stanton's biography, From Selma to Sorrow, The Life and Death of Viola Liuzzo. Here now is part of Liuzzo's story.
My name is Viola Greg Liuzzo. I was born in California, Pennsylvania in 1925. My dad worked in the coal mines and my mom was a teacher. I never had much money, and things got even worse when Dad lost his right hand in a mining accident. So after that, we mostly depended on my mom's income, which wasn't much. I mean, it was hard for anyone to get work during the Depression. We moved to Tennessee when I was a toddler, and Mom took a job as a teacher there, but it didn't last long. And after that, she worked for a while as a manager of a grocery store. My parents did the best for my sister and me, but the truth is they were pretty much beaten down by life and the hardships they faced. At some point, my father just gave up, and it was up to my mother to manage how she could. She worked hard all the time. She was strong, scrappy, and resourceful, and she taught me that no matter what your circumstances might be, you always have choices. If there's no work in your hometown, you move somewhere else. If you can't find the job you want, you take the job you can get. My God, how that woman worked. The other thing about Mom was that she really believed that no matter how much or how little we had, it was always important to share with others. Like at the grocery store, if somebody was hungry and didn't have money, she would give them something out of her own pocket. We were a poor, struggling white family, but it was very clear to me from the beginning that it was the Black people who were generally the poorest in our community. And I could not understand the segregation that was a part of our everyday life in the South. Everything was separate. Separate churches, separate bathrooms, separate schools, separate everything. One day when I was 6, I got into trouble because I took some money from my mom's cash register at the store and gave it to a Black girl whose family couldn't afford to buy her shoes. My mom said, "Vi, I know you're trying to do a good thing, but that money isn't ours to give. It belongs to the store." Soon after that, we started moving around from place to place to find work for my mom. We bounced around from Tennessee to Georgia. I never finished the school year at the same place that I started. When I was a teenager at the beginning of World War II, we moved to Michigan, where my parents found work in a plant that made airplanes for the war. That was a little while back then, well, maybe more than a little. And despite my parents begging me not to do it, I dropped out of school in the 10th grade and moved out on my own to Detroit. I found work in a cafeteria.
While she was working at the cafeteria in Detroit, Viola met and married George Argyris, with whom she had 2 daughters, Penny and Mary. It was during this same period that Viola met Sarah Evans, who became her best friend. Sarah, a black woman, had been born and raised in the South, as had Viola, so the 2 women had much in common. Viola's marriage to George was not a happy one and ended in divorce after just a few years. Viola started working as a waitress, and Sarah cared for Viola's children as well as her own. Perhaps more than anything else in her life, Viola was greatly influenced by her friendship with Sarah. The 2 were different in many ways. Viola was white and Sarah was black. Viola was outspoken and headstrong, while Sarah was more retiring. Viola was passionate and a little disorganized, while Sarah was a calm, steady presence. In some ways, Viola's children felt that they had 2 mothers in these 2 close friends who complemented each other so well. After a couple of years, Viola met Jim Liuzzo, a union organizer for the Teamsters, and the 2 of them fell in love. Viola considered Jim the best man she ever knew, loyal, steadfast, loving, and delighted with the passion that Viola brought to everything she did. After they were married in 1951, they had 3 children together, and Jim legally adopted Viola's 2 older children. As the children got older, Viola decided that she wanted to become better educated and pursue a career. She entered a program to train as an assistant at a laboratory at the Carnegie Institute of Detroit. And 2 years later, to further enhance her education, she enrolled in classes at Wayne State University. She was also active in local efforts on behalf of reform in education and economic justice. Twice she was arrested, pleaded guilty, and insisted on a trial to publicize the causes for which she was an advocate. Sarah Evans said of her friend, "Viola Liuzzo lived a life that combined the care of her family and her home with a concern for the world around her. This involvement was not always understood by her friends, nor was it appreciated by those around her." In 1964, Viola began attending the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Detroit, 2 blocks from the Wayne State campus. And through Evans, she became active in the Detroit chapter of the NAACP. That same year, Evans and Liuzzo drove to New York City to attend a United Nations seminar on civil rights sponsored by the Unitarian Universalist Association. Let's hear from Viola herself about how she ended up going to Selma.
The more involved I became in social justice issues, it became clear to me that racism was eating America's heart and soul. I mean, I was always acutely aware of the general racism that exists in this country, but it did look like things were changing, coming to a head. I mean, big things were happening in Alabama. A black church was bombed by Klansmen, killing 4 little girls who were attending Sunday school. After that, Alabama sort of became the epicenter of the racial rights movement, the civil rights movement. In March of 1965, Dr. King issued a call for people to come to Selma to march to Montgomery, and I knew I had to go. I told Jim I was going, and he tried to talk me out of it, of course. He said, it might be dangerous. And I said, I know. He said, Vi, you might get killed. I said, I know. He said, this really isn't our fight. And I said, it's everyone's fight. Everyone's. I told him I was going. I was sick of people sitting around talking about it and not doing anything. So I went. When I arrived in Selma, I was assigned to the greeting table where everybody came in and I would get them settled and so forth. People kept coming and coming and coming. I can't tell you how heartening it was to have all these people working together for this one issue. Priests, nuns, rabbis, Unitarian ministers, teachers, students, old and young, teenagers, black, white, all coming together. All coming together. We marched. 30,000 of us marched into Montgomery. I had to walk the last few miles in my bare feet because my shoes were killing me at that point. When we got to the steps of the Capitol, we heard Dr. King say, "We are on the move now, and no wave of racism can stop us. We are on the move now. The burning of our churches will not deter us. The bombing of our homes will not dissuade us. We are on the move now. The beating and killing of our clergymen, young people, will not divert us. We are on the move now. Like an idea whose time has come. Not even the marching of mighty armies will halt us. We are moving to the land of freedom." After the march, I volunteered to help drive people back to Selma. I ferried 3 carloads of people, and then on my last delivery, I just had 1 passenger, Leroy Moton, a young man about the same age as my oldest daughter. As we were driving along, I noticed that we were being followed by a car full of drunken idiots, Klansmen. And they came right up behind us to our bumper and started honking their horn and shouting at us. I didn't even know what they were saying. Leroy was really scared, but I was more annoyed than anything else. So I started singing at the top of my lungs, "We shall overcome. We shall." And then I floored it. But they caught up and they pulled alongside my car. And when I turned to look at them, I saw the gun. Then it was lights out.
Viola Liuzzo's husband, Jim, got the news of her murder a little after midnight that night. The following day, President Lyndon Johnson called Jim to say, "I don't think she died in vain because this is going to be a battle all out as far as I'm concerned." Jim told the president, "My wife died for a sacred battle, the rights of humanity. She had one concern and only one in mind." She took a quote from Abraham Lincoln that all men are created equal, and that's the way she believed. Shortly after Viola Liuzzo's death, rumors about her began circulating in the newspapers. Some said she was a drug addict. Some said she had only gone to the South to meet and have sex with black men. Her family couldn't imagine who would say such things. Then, when the Klansmen were put on trial for Liuzzo's death, it came out that a key witness was a paid FBI informant who had been in the Klansmen's car. Years later, the family sought to have Liuzzo's FBI file opened. They finally succeeded, and that's when they discovered that the rumors about her had come directly from J. Edgar Hoover. The FBI director was desperate to divert attention from the agency by smearing her. The smears took a horrible toll. Jim Liuzzo became a heavy drinker and later died. The Liuzzo children all moved away from Detroit. Because she was a woman, after her death, Viola Liuzzo was criticized much more than she was praised. People thought she should have stayed home with her children, that she was foolish for putting herself in harm's way. While the men who died in Selma soon became known as martyrs and heroes, Viola Liuzzo was viewed as some kind of miscreant who must have been loose or crazy. Because of the FBI smear campaign and because of the prevailing sexism of the time, her courage and determination were disregarded or disrespected. Liuzzo's murderers were acquitted by an all-white jury. They later served less than 10 years of jail time after being convicted of federal conspiracy charges. Decades after her murder, Liuzzo received some recognition for her personal sacrifice. She is among the 40 civil rights martyrs honored on the Civil Rights Memorial in Montgomery, which was created in 1989. 2 years later, the women of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference placed a marker where she was killed on Highway 80 in Alabama. I'd like to let Viola Liuzzo have the last word about her life and death.
You think that a mother's love stops after death? I can tell you that it does not. It doesn't stop. Ever. Even after my death, my heart still bled for my children. Even now it does. When my daughter Sally returned to first grade the day after my funeral, there was a group of people shouting at her. These were adults, not kids. They hurled truly ugly epithets and rocks at her. And she cried, and she trudged along in the rain, staring down at those white saddle shoes I bought her just a few weeks before. My God, how utterly cruel and ignorant people can be. And now there was nothing I could do about it. I hate what my children have had to go through since I died, and I wish I could be there for them. But I also know that I had to go. I had to go to Selma. For me, there was really no choice in the matter. I mean, I couldn't have lived with myself otherwise. I don't know if life and death have any meaning. I think that maybe they have the meaning that you give to them. But I know what I want my life and my death to mean. I know how I want people to remember me. When people think of Viola Liuzzo, I want them to remember the importance of standing up for what you believe. When people think of me, I want them to know that you can't just sit at home and watch TV and get bombarded with all the bad news and overwhelmed by everything that's going on. At some point in your life, you have to stand up, you have to walk out the door, you have to take action and take some risks. When people talk about the meaning of my life, I want it to be this: that people of conscience must participate in what's going on in the world and not just be observers. Be bold enough to love the world the way a mother loves her children. And be prepared. Be prepared to have your heart broken.
As Unitarian Universalists, we have a history of activism of which we are justifiably proud. 2 of the martyrs of Selma were our own. Hundreds of clergy and lay people answered King's call to come and march. But our history is not enough. While the freedom movement has changed over the last 50 or 60 years, it is absolutely critical that we take part in what is happening now. We must not sleep through the revolution or stand at the sidelines. Just this week, the U.S. Supreme Court seemed inclined to make it more difficult to challenge widely used voting laws that in practice might be more of a burden to minority voters, making it harder, if not impossible, to use the Voting Rights Act to sue over legislation that creates obstacles to voting in the name of election security. In other words, right-wing legislatures and courts are on the verge of gutting the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the landmark legislation that Viola, Liuzzo, and others fought and died for. Also, this week, while the U.S. House of Representatives passed a sweeping expansion of federal voting rights, the bill appears likely to fail in the U.S. Senate. The fight is not over, and it is our time to act. Please contact your senators and other elected officials and let them know where you stand on voting rights. I hope and pray that we will not only remember the courage and great sacrifice civil rights leaders and those that stood in solidarity with them, like Viola Liuzzo, but also that we will let their fire and passion kindle our own as we work for freedom in our own time. May it be so. Amen. And many thanks to Heidi Miller-Smith for doing such a fabulous job portraying Viola Liuzzo in today's service. Please join me in thanking Heidi. The song that Viola Liuzzo reportedly was singing when she was killed, "We Shall Overcome," started out as a spiritual, "I'll Be All Right." It was apparently first used in a protest context in October 1945 in Charleston, South Carolina, where members of the Food, Tobacco, Agricultural, and Allied Workers Union, FTA-CIO, who were mostly female and black, held a 5-month strike against the American Tobacco Company. To keep their spirits during the cold, wet winter of 1945 to 46, to keep their spirits up, one of the strikers, a woman named Lucille Simmons, led a version of this song to end each day's picketing. Union organizer Zilphia Horton was present at this strike and later spread the song elsewhere as it became a hymn of the civil rights movement. Lucille Simmons, by the way, went on to become the first black woman elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives. I invite you to join us in singing "We Shall Overcome" in solidarity with all of those, past and present, who have worked and continue to work to expand democracy, freedom, and human rights for all.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
If you'd like to make a gift via our online giving system, you can do so one of two ways. You can go to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says Online Giving, and then follow the instructions. Once you get to the drop-down menu, just choose either 2021 Pledge Collections, if you're making a payment on your pledge, or non-pledge collections for other gifts. Or you can give by text at 412-324-3130. Just dial that number using your smartphone and follow the instructions. You can also mail a check if you prefer, and you can find our mailing address on our website, sunnyhill.org. Thank you for your generosity.
Please join us in saying the words for extinguishing our chalice.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fires of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words were written by Joel Miller. Let our lives be a prayer that waters dry souls. Men's broken hearts refuses to be terrorized, seeks this world's beauty, and carries us through its storms. Go in peace.